On September 17, 2001, 6 days after the towers fell, a comedian on a major American network said something nobody else would say out loud. He said the hijackers were not cowards. He said the people firing missiles from 2,000 miles away were the cowards. FedEx pulled its money. Sears pulled its money. The White House warned Americans to watch what they say. 9 months later, the show was dead. He was 35. Hollywood had made its first example of the cancel culture era. Before there was a phrase for it, he never said he was sorry for being right. The country was on fire. Flags on every porch. Patriot Act on every desk. Dissent was treason. The culture drew a line. He walked across it on day 6. This is the story of Bill Maher, the comedian Hollywood canceled before there was a word for it. The room would change 4 times. He would not. To understand why that matters, you have to start before the cancellation. Before he was a target, he was a kid from New Jersey with a strange home life. Catholic father, Jewish mother. He did not even learn his mother was Jewish until he was 13 years old. Think about that for a second. A boy raised in one religion who finds out at 13 that he is also another. That kind of thing makes you suspicious of certainty. It makes you ask questions other people are not asking. It makes you allergic to any single group telling you who you are. He went to Cornell University, graduated in 1978 with an English degree, started doing stand-up at a small Manhattan club called Catch a Rising Star, grinding it out night after night for an audience that mostly did not care. Carson appearances, small film roles, a slow, unglamorous build through the 80s. Then in July 1993, he launched a show on Comedy Central called Politically Incorrect. The format was simple, but nobody had done it before. Take a politician, put them next to a comedian, put a celebrity on the other side, throw in a writer or a journalist, give them a topic, and watch what happens. The show was sharp, it was unpredictable, it was funny. ABC saw the numbers and poached it for network television in 1997. 10 Emmy nominations across the run. He was not a provocateur. He was the only guy in the room who had actually read the news that morning. Then came the 6 days that changed everything. Barbara Olson, a conservative commentator, was supposed to be a guest on his show on September 11th, 2001. She was on American Airlines Flight 77, the plane that hit the Pentagon. She never made it to the studio. 6 days later, on September 17th, Maher had a guest named Dinesh D'Souza, a conservative writer. D'Souza pushed back on the president's framing that the hijackers were cowards. He called them warriors. Maher agreed. He said, and these are his exact words, "We have been the cowards, lobbing cruise missiles from 2,000 miles away." The line that ended his network career was 18 words long. FedEx pulled out within days. Sears followed. The Sinclair Broadcast Group, which controlled a huge chunk of ABC's affiliate stations, dropped the show months before it was officially killed. On June 16, 2002, ABC announced the cancellation. And here is the part most people forget. 6 days later, the Los Angeles Press Club gave him their President's Award for championing free speech. The same 6-day window that destroyed him also crowned him. The institution that punished him and the institution that honored him agreed on the facts. They just disagreed on what to do about a man who told the truth at the wrong time. But that is nothing compared to what would happen next. He should have been done. A 36-year-old talk show host with no platform and a reputation as the man who defended the hijackers. That was the read inside the industry. Untouchable. Nobody would hire him. The networks were terrified. The advertisers were a closed door. Except there was one network in America that did not care about advertisers because it did not have any. HBO ran on subscriptions. Nobody could pull money from a show because nobody was paying to be there in the first place. On February 21st, 2003, Real Time with Bill Maher premiered, 8 months after the funeral of his last show. The format was almost identical. Monologue, panel, the segment that became his signature, called New Rules. But the safety rails were gone. The thing that saved him was not bravery from the network. It was structure. HBO could not cave because there was nobody to cave to. He had stumbled into the only corner of American media where an advertiser boycott meant nothing, where a White House warning had no economic teeth, where the worst thing a viewer could do was cancel their subscription. He would stay in that corner for over 20 years, and almost nobody noticed that the entire reason he survived was an accident of business models. Then he turned the same blade on religion. In October 2008, he released a documentary called Religious, directed by Larry Charles, the man who made Borat. The film made fun of every religion on the planet: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Scientology, Mormonism, every belief system with an organized structure and a building. It became the highest grossing documentary of its opening weekend. He thought the worst of the controversy was behind him. He was wrong. 6 years later, on October 3rd, 2014, Ben Affleck sat at his table on Real Time and called him a racist on live television in front of millions of viewers. The topic was Islam. Maher and his guest Sam Harris had been arguing that liberals were refusing to criticize the religion's worst practices because they were scared of being called bigots. Affleck exploded. "It's gross. It's racist." Maher did not back down for a single second. He said Islam was the only religion that acts like the mafia, that will kill you if you say the wrong thing or draw the wrong picture or write the wrong book. The clip went viral within hours. 2 million views in days. People who had never watched his show suddenly knew his name. And here is the detail almost nobody noticed at the time. The argument he was making in 2014 was the exact same argument he had made in his documentary in 2008. The exact same argument. Nothing had changed except the political weather. And that is nothing compared to what is coming next. Because that same accusation, that same single word, racist, would follow him into every fight for the next 10 years. The argument did not change. The culture did. In 2012, Bill Maher gave $1 million to a super PAC supporting Barack Obama's re-election campaign. $1 million of his own money. He was, by every measurable standard the political world used at the time, a mainstream Democratic donor in good standing. He was on the team. He was inside the tent. By 2018, the same man, holding the exact same positions he had held in 2012, had been quietly relabeled as a reactionary. He did not move. The floor moved under him. His critique of religion, which had been celebrated by the cultural left in 2008, was now Islamophobia. His defense of free speech, which had been liberal value since the 1960s civil rights movement, was now coded as right-wing. His skepticism of identity politics as a winning electoral strategy, which had been the standard Democratic position when Obama was elected in 2008, was now considered bigotry. He kept saying it on every platform he had. "I haven't changed. The left has." He said it on his show. He said it on podcasts. He said it in interviews with journalists who used to celebrate him. Nobody on his side wanted to hear it. They wanted him to update his opinions to match the new orthodoxy. He refused, over and over, week after week, year after year, monologue after monologue, while the political ground under his feet shifted into something he no longer recognized. But that is nothing compared to what was happening backstage. In the small, private moments the cameras almost never caught. There is a moment that keeps repeating on his show, and you have to watch closely to see it. A young progressive guest, sometimes a comedian, sometimes a writer, sometimes a younger politician, leans forward and tells him he is out of touch, tells him his generation does not get it anymore, tells him the rules have changed and he failed to read the memo. And for half a second, before the comeback lands, before the audience laughs, before the camera cuts away, his face goes somewhere else. Not angry, not defensive, tired. You can see it if you know what to look for. The man is 68 years old, standing on the same stage where he stood at 48, and the audience in front of him is half his age. His friends from the 1990s have either gone full progressive or full MAGA. The political middle he used to share with half of Hollywood is empty. He is lonely in the room he built. That single facial beat, that half second of fatigue before the joke fires, does what an hour of voiceover cannot. He is not enjoying being right. He is exhausted by it. He sounds like a man who would have happily moved on 20 years ago if the culture had not kept proving him correct. And that is nothing compared to the next blow, which would come from a place he never expected. September 2025. ABC suspended Jimmy Kimmel from his late-night show over comments he had made about the man who killed Charlie Kirk. The FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, went on a podcast and threatened ABC's broadcasting license. Within hours, Kimmel was off the air. The next night, on Real Time, Maher opened his monologue with one of the sharpest lines he had ever delivered in 23 years of monologues. ABC stands for always be caving. Then he reminded the audience of something the entire industry had been trying very hard to forget. It had been exactly 24 years to the day since his own comments on the same network had gotten him pushed out the door. "I got canceled before cancel even had a culture. Same network, same pattern. different decade, different administration, different cultural climate, different political party in power, but the same essential cowardice. He had been saying for years that Hollywood was not a den of brave people. It was, in his words, a secret cabal of people terrified of looking like racists. The Kimmel suspension proved his point on national television. The structural insight he had been delivering for 2 decades was suddenly visible to everyone with a screen. But that is nothing compared to the contradiction he was about to drop on his own audience just months later. For 10 years, Bill Maher was one of Donald Trump's loudest critics on cable television. In 2013, he offered $5 million to charity if Trump could prove he was not the biological son of his mother having sex with an orangutan. Trump sued him, for real. The lawsuit was eventually dropped, but it set the tone for a decade of mutual hostility. For 10 years on Real Time, Maher called Trump a danger to the republic, a threat to American democracy, an embarrassment to the office, a clown. Then, in April 2025, he had dinner with Trump at the White House. The musician Kid Rock arranged the meeting. The left lost its mind. The right was confused. The internet exploded. Maher came back on his show the following Friday and did something almost nobody in his profession ever does. He told the truth about what happened. He said Trump was gracious. He said the man in the room was different from the man on television. He also said everything he had said about Trump for 10 years was still true, both things at once. The audience that had cheered his Trump critiques for a full decade now called him a sellout. His longtime fans on the left felt betrayed. The right tried to claim him, and he refused to be claimed. His worst quality and his best quality, it turns out, are the exact same thing. He will not lie to make his side look better. He will not flatten his enemies into cartoons just because the cartoon version is easier to sell. He insists every single week on telling the truth as he saw it in the room, even when the truth costs him something on both sides. While cable television was shrinking around him and the network model was collapsing, he had quietly built something else. In August 2022, he launched a podcast called Club Random. The format was the opposite of everything he had ever done on television in his entire career. No panel, no segments, no commercial breaks. No producer in his ear counting down to a hard out. 2.5, sometimes 3 hours with one single guest, a bottle of whiskey on the table between them. He talked to Megyn Kelly for hours. He talked to Quentin Tarantino. He talked to Larry David. He talked to Donald Trump himself in 2024, the same Trump he had been suing and being sued by a decade earlier. A new audience found him there, 25 to 40-year-olds on YouTube. People who had never watched HBO in their lives, people who had never seen Politically Incorrect, people who did not even know about the 2001 cancellation. They were discovering him as a podcaster who happened to also have a TV show, not as a TV host who happened to have a podcast. The man Hollywood had tried to shrink in 2002 was now bigger than the institution that exiled him. He had outlived the gatekeepers. He had outlived the format that almost killed him. He had outlived the cultural moment that tried to make him an example. And that is nothing compared to the larger pattern, the one that only becomes visible when you step back and look at all of it at once. Here is the closing argument. He was called a traitor in 2001 for questioning the cowardice framing of the 9/11 attacks. By 2011, the mainstream American foreign policy consensus had quietly arrived at the same conclusion he had been crucified for stating 10 years earlier. He was called a racist in 2014 for the Ben Affleck debate about Islam. By 2020, the exact same critique of religion and liberalism was being made by op-ed columnists at the New York Times and considered a respectable mainstream position. He was called out of touch in 2018 for warning Democrats that the excesses of cancel culture and identity politics would eventually cost them national elections. By 2024 and into 2025, the party's own internal post-election reports were saying exactly that, almost word for word. The pattern is not subtle once you look at it. He is consistently 5 to 10 years ahead of the cultural consensus, and he is consistently punished for it in the meantime. Then the consensus catches up, quietly, slowly, without ever crediting him for getting there first. That is not luck. That is not coincidence. That is a man who refuses to be told what to think, working in a profession where almost everyone is told what to think and pretends otherwise. That is what makes him dangerous to Hollywood. Not his ratings, not his audience. The fact that he keeps being right, on a delay, in public, where everyone can see it. The question this film leaves you with is not whether you agree with Bill Maher on any specific issue. It is whether you can tell the difference between someone who is wrong and someone who is early. Because the culture has spent 23 years confusing the two. And the cost of that confusion has been the silencing of the people we needed to hear from the most. So which side of the room are you on now? If this story made you reconsider something you thought was settled, subscribe. We make documentaries about more figures the culture got wrong. The people who paid the price for telling the truth before the rest of us were ready to hear it. The next one might surprise you even more than this one did.